I'll never forget the day he looked at me with that mocking smile and said, "I'd rather go to jail than give you a single cent." We were at the courthouse door, having just left the child support hearing. He had just been notified by the judge that he would have to pay. And instead of thinking about his 3-year-old daughter, who needed to eat, get clothes, and take medicine, he looked me in the eyes and chose jail. At that moment, something broke inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was the certainty that I was truly alone, that he wasn't going to change, that no matter what the judge said, what the law said, he would continue to run away, because for him, being a father was optional. And me? I had no choice. I was forced to take care of everything. Food, housing, clothes, school, doctors, everything. While he chose to go to jail as if that were some kind of victory. I went home with my daughter in my arms and a decision hammering in my head. I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. He had humiliated me, abandoned her, laughed in my face. But now he had done it in front of a judge, with everything recorded with witnesses. And for the first time, I had the law on my side. So I did what he thought I would never have the courage to do. I called the police. My hand trembled when I dialed the number. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. But when the voice on the other end answered, I took a deep breath and said, "I need to file a police report. My daughter's father is in arrears on child support and has refused to pay. He said he'd rather go to jail." The operator gave me instructions. I wrote everything down. And that night, while my daughter slept, I prepared every document, every receipt, every conversation that proved he had never paid anything. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if it would amount to anything, if he would actually be arrested, if it would change anything in our lives. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to accept being trampled on anymore. I wasn't going to lower my head while he laughed in my face anymore. And if he wanted jail so badly, then I was going to give it to him. If you've ever heard a father say he won't pay child support, that he'd rather do anything than take responsibility for his child, like this video, because we can't stay silent. And comment below if you've ever had the courage to go all the way in court. Sometimes a mother's comment strengthens another who's thinking of giving up. In the following days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had done. Had I overreacted? Had calling the police been too much? I looked at my daughter playing on the living room floor and thought, what if this makes everything worse? What if he gets even angrier and disappears for good? What if his family comes to attack me, calling me vengeful, a gold digger, a woman who wants to destroy his life? I spent sleepless nights, turning everything over in my head. The guilt hit me hard, because even after everything he did, even after every humiliation, every broken promise, every month my daughter asked about him and he didn't show up, there was still a part of me that felt wrong for having taken that action. As if I were the villain of the story. As if demanding the bare minimum, which was supporting my own daughter, was asking too much. But then I'd look at the empty cupboard, the bills piled on top of the refrigerator, her little shoe that was already too tight, and I didn't have the money to buy another one, and the guilt would disappear. It would give way to anger again. Because while I was there, feeling bad for having done the right thing, he was out on the street, free, spending money on beer, on new clothes, on anything that wasn't his daughter. A friend called me and said she'd seen him at a bar, laughing, celebrating something with his friends, posting photos on social media, all dressed up with a gold chain around his neck. And there I was, sharing my lunch with my daughter because there wasn't enough food left for both of us. He had money for everything except for her. And he still had the nerve to say he'd rather be in jail. It was at that moment that I understood. I did nothing wrong. I only did what any mother would do seeing her daughter in need while the father chooses to ignore her. I didn't call the police for revenge. I called because I was tired of begging, tired of pleading, tired of seeing my daughter paying the price for his irresponsibility. And if that made me the villain in his story, so be it. Because in my daughter's story, I was the only heroine she had. 2 weeks after the call, I received the notification. The child support enforcement process had been accepted. Now it was official. He had a deadline to pay everything he owed with interest and adjustments, or he would face criminal charges. I read that paper about 5 times, my hand trembling. It was real. Justice was on my side. For the first time in 3 years, someone other than me was holding him accountable. I chased after everything the lawyer asked for. I gathered proof of every expense for my daughter, prescriptions, doctor's appointments, preschool registration, grocery bills, everything. I made a detailed spreadsheet of each month he didn't pay, each broken promise, I'll deposit it later, that never turned into money in the account. There were pages and pages of evidence. And every line of that document hurt because it was living proof of how many times I had held everything together alone. While I was organizing the papers, my daughter came and asked, "Mom, why are you crying?" I hadn't even realized I was crying. I quickly wiped my face and said everything was fine, that Mommy was just tired. But the truth is, I was exhausted. Exhausted from having to prove that my daughter deserved the basics. Exhausted from having to chase justice for something that should be automatic, natural, obvious. Some of his family members started messaging me, saying I was exaggerating, that this would ruin his life, that he was going through financial difficulties. And I replied, he has money to go out every weekend, but not enough to feed his daughter. Where are the difficulties? I blocked everyone because I no longer had the patience to listen to excuses from people who never put food on my daughter's table. The lawyer called me and said the bailiff was going to try to serve him with the summons in person, that if he refused to pay, the arrest warrant would be issued. I felt a chill in my stomach. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was fear. Fear of what was to come, but also a glimmer of hope. Hope that finally he would have to face the consequences of his choices, and that my daughter would no longer be invisible to him. It was on a Thursday afternoon that my cell phone rang. It was the bailiff. He said he had managed to serve him with the summons in person at the door of the company where he worked, that he had handed him the summons in front of his coworkers, that he had turned red with anger, had torn up the paper, had yelled that it was persecution, that I was crazy, that he would never pay. When I hung up the phone, my legs went weak. I sat on the kitchen floor and stayed there, breathing deeply, trying to process it. He had been humiliated at work in the same way he had humiliated me so many times. In the same way he humiliated his daughter every time he disappeared, every time he promised and didn't deliver, every time he pretended we didn't exist. And for the first time, I wasn't the only one bearing the weight. It was the law. It was the consequence. But the feeling wasn't one of victory. It was one of exhaustion. An exhaustion that came from so deep it seemed endless. Because I didn't want to have come to this. I didn't want to have to sue my daughter's father. I wanted him to simply do what was right, to look at her and see what I saw, a child who deserved to be cared for, loved, and supported, but he never saw it. And now, the justice system was going to force him to do what his heart never wanted to do. That night, I barely slept. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could happen. What if he really went to jail? What if he lost his job? What if that made the situation even worse? But then I looked to the side at the crib where my daughter slept, and I remembered she went hungry. She wore old diapers because I didn't have money to buy them. She got sick and I had to choose between medicine and food, while he chose beer, partying, indifference. I woke up in the middle of the night, went to her room, and just stood there, looking at that small, peaceful, innocent face. And I thought, I did the right thing. It doesn't matter how many hate messages I receive from his family. It doesn't matter if they call me vengeful. I did what a mother has to do, protect. And if protecting her meant facing him, his family, and even the fear of my own conscience, then I was going to endure it because she deserved more than crumbs. She deserved dignity. If you've ever felt the weight of having to fight alone, of having to be strong even when you're breaking inside, comment below, because sometimes we just need to know that we're not the only ones. It was on a Saturday morning, right after all that something changed. I was sitting on the bed, looking at my phone, seeing the notifications about the legal process, with that knot in my chest that wouldn't go away. My daughter woke up, came to me with her hair messy, climbed onto the bed, and simply threw herself into my lap. She hugged my neck with those little arms and said, "I love you, Mom." I broke down. I started crying right there, with her in my arms. And she didn't understand. She just looked at me, scared, wiping my tear with her little hand and asking, "Mom, does it hurt?" I shook my head and said no, that it was just tiredness. But it wasn't just tiredness. It was everything. It was the exhaustion of months, years, of carrying everything alone. And it was also the relief of knowing why I was doing all of that. Because it wasn't about me. It never was. It was about that hug. It was so she would never lack anything. So she would grow up knowing that, even without her father present, she was loved, cared for, protected. That she was worth every fight, every lawsuit, every sleepless night. That she wasn't a burden, she wasn't a problem. She was the reason for everything. That day we didn't do anything special. We had breakfast together, watched cartoons, played on the living room floor. Simple things, but I looked at her and saw things differently. I saw the strength she gave me without even knowing it. Each of her laughs erased a little of the pain. Each "Mom, look here," reminded me that I couldn't give up, because she needed me whole, standing strong. I put her to sleep that night and stayed there beside the crib, just watching her chest rise and fall, calm, peaceful. And I thought, no matter what comes next, it doesn't matter if he's arrested, if he pays, if he keeps running. I'll stay here. I'll continue to be the comfort, the protection, the certainty she needs. Because while he chose prison, I chose her. And that choice is worth more than any sentence. 3 weeks after the notification, I was at the market with my daughter when my cell phone vibrated. It was a notification from the bank. You received a deposit. I stopped in the middle of the aisle, my hand trembling, and opened the app. There it was, the total amount of the overdue child support, all of it, at once, with interest, adjustments, and penalties. He had paid. I stood there, staring at that number on the screen, in disbelief. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I had done the right thing. It was proof that he did, in fact, have the means to pay. That all that talk of, I'm broke, I'm struggling, I can't help, was a lie. He always had the means. He just didn't want to, until he was forced to. I went back home and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I bought real food. Meat, fruit, yogurt, those things I always saw at the market, but never put in my cart because they didn't fit the budget. I bought a new pair of shoes for my daughter, a little dress she'd been asking for months. And when I got home, I sat on the kitchen floor and cried with relief. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wouldn't have to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying diapers. I wouldn't have to stretch the rice to last the whole week. I wouldn't have to lie to my daughter that I wasn't hungry just to make sure she ate. I could breathe, just a little, but I could. That night, I made a real dinner. Rice, beans, meat, salad. I set the table, sat my daughter in her high chair, and we ate together. She ate everything, asked for seconds, smiled at me with sauce on her mouth, and I thought, This abundant meal, her smile, this is what he should have given her from the beginning. But he had to come by force. He had to come with a bailiff, with threats of jail, with public humiliation. I kept the deposit slip in a folder, along with all the other documents from the case. Because I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. He had paid once. But would he continue? Or would he disappear again and I would have to start all over again? I didn't know. But one thing I was sure of. Now I knew he could pay. And if he tried to run away again, I would be ready. If you've also had to fight in court to get the basics for your child, subscribe to the channel, because this journey isn't over yet, and I want you to follow every step of the way with me. A few days after that deposit, I was organizing my wardrobe and found a blouse I hadn't worn in years. It was from before my pregnancy, from when I still went out, dressed up, and felt beautiful. I tried it on out of curiosity. It fit. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman who was there. It wasn't just my body that had changed. It was my gaze. I saw weariness, sadness, a hardness that hadn't existed before. I had become just the struggling mother, the woman fighting in court, the warrior everyone admires but no one asks how she really is. And the woman I was before, the one who dreamed, who laughed easily, who believed in love, she had vanished. Loneliness hit me differently that day. It wasn't the loneliness of having no one to help me with my daughter. It was the loneliness of having no one for me. No one to hug me at the end of the day and tell me everything would be all right. No one to share my anxieties, my fears, my small victories. I had completely erased myself. I had become nothing but a function. Mother, provider, fighter. But I was still a woman. And that woman was dying inside. A friend invited me out on a Saturday night. She said it would do me good, that I needed to clear my head. I left my daughter with the neighbor and went. But in the middle of the party, in the middle of the music, the people laughing, I felt completely out of place. As if I no longer belonged to that world. As if the woman I was had died the day he walked out the door and left me alone. I came home early. I picked up my daughter, thanked the neighbor, and lay down with her beside me. I stared at the ceiling thinking, will I ever be myself again? Will I ever be able to look in the mirror and see more than just tiredness? Will someone ever look at me not as the single mother who overcame it, but as the woman who is still here, alive, wanting to be seen, to be loved, to be more than just strong? I had no answer. I only had one certainty. I had forgotten what it was like to be a woman, and that hurt almost as much as everything he had done to me. It was on a Monday morning, looking at my bank account with the pension money deposited, that something clicked in my head. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't in the red. I wasn't in debt. I wasn't suffocating. And I thought, and now that I can breathe, what do I do? Do I just keep surviving? Or do I try to build something better? I sat at the kitchen table and picked up an old notebook. I started writing. It wasn't just a list of bills, it was a plan. A life plan. How much did I need to save each month? How much could I invest in myself? Could I take a course? Could I improve my job, earn more, have a better income that didn't depend solely on cleaning and odd jobs? I started researching. Online courses, vocational training, things I could do at home in my own time. I found a manicure and pedicure course, another one on waxing, another one on administrative assistance, practical things that could give me extra income that could open doors. And for the first time, I didn't just think about surviving the month. I thought about building a future. I talked to the neighbor who was taking care of my daughter. We made a deal. I would pay her regularly to look after her a few afternoons a week, and during that time I would study, take courses, and get more organized. It wasn't easy, it wasn't cheap, but it was possible. And what was possible was more than I had before. I also started to really get organized. I made a detailed spreadsheet of everything. How much money came in, how much went out, how much I could save. I opened a savings account just for emergencies. Another one just for my daughter, for when she grows up and needs a better school, supplies, clothes. For the first time, I wasn't just putting out fires. I was planning. And planning gave me hope. I looked at my daughter playing on the floor and thought, I don't want her to grow up seeing her mother only struggle. I want her to see her mother win. I want her to see that it's possible to rebuild, that it's possible to climb out of the abyss and rise. Not because of him, not because he paid child support, but because I decided that we deserved more, and that I was going to pursue it, with him or without him. 2 months after the first deposit, my cell phone rang. It was a number I knew by heart, but it had been blocked for over a year. He had managed to call me from another number. I answered without thinking, and his voice on the other end froze me. We need to talk. About my daughter. My first reaction was anger. Pure anger. Now she's your daughter? When you said you preferred prison, she wasn't. He took a deep breath and said he regretted it, that he understood his mistake, that he wanted to meet her, be present, be a real father. And I listened to all of that with a knot in my stomach, because I had heard those words before, and none of them had become reality. I arranged to meet him in a square, far from my daughter. I wasn't going to let him near her until I was sure it wasn't just another game. When I arrived, he was sitting on a bench, his head down. He looked different. Thinner, more tired. He stood up when he saw me and tried to smile, but I didn't smile back. He began to speak. He said the process had affected him, that being notified at work had been humiliating, that he had lost the respect of his colleagues, that his entire family had turned their backs on him when they found out he owed child support to his own daughter, that he had spent sleepless nights thinking about everything he had done wrong, and that now he wanted to make amends. I listened to everything in silence, and when he finished, I asked, "Do you want to fix things for her or for yourself? Because if it's to clear your conscience, for the family to stop judging you, for you to feel less guilty, then it's not necessary. We're fine without you." He looked at me surprised, as if he hadn't expected that answer. As if he thought I would run out the door, happy because he finally decided to show up. But I was no longer that woman who begged for his presence, who accepted crumbs, who let him come and go as he pleased. I had changed. And if he wanted to be a part of my daughter's life, he would have to prove it, not with words, with actions. And I would be watching his every move. I sat down in front of him on that bench and made it perfectly clear, if you want to meet her, it's going to be my way, with rules. You won't show up whenever you want and disappear when you're tired. You won't promise things you won't keep. And most importantly, you won't enter her life unless you're absolutely sure you're going to stay. Because if you disappear again, I'll be the one picking up the pieces. He agreed to everything, too quickly. And that bothered me. Because agreeing is easy. Following through is what's difficult. He said he would pay the alimony on time every month, that he wanted to see her gradually, that he understood he had to regain her trust. But trust? He had destroyed that trust. And rebuilding it would take much more than pretty words and empty promises. I went home with a heavy heart, because there was a war raging inside me. On one side, anger. Anger at everything he had done, at every time he humiliated me, at every day my daughter went hungry while he chose indifference. On the other side, there was the desire to believe that people change, that maybe, just maybe, he had truly understood. But there was a third thing, stronger than anything else. Fear. Fear of letting him in and him hurting my daughter the way he hurt me. Because she didn't ask to be born. She didn't ask to have an absent father. And if I let him get close now and he disappeared again after she became attached, the damage would be irreparable. She would suffer. And I would never forgive myself for allowing it. I spoke with the psychologist I had started seeing. She told me something that kept nagging at me. You can't protect your daughter from his absence, but you can protect her from the consequences of his inconsistency. Set boundaries, demand proof, and don't open the door until you're sure. And that's what I was going to do. I called him the next day and said, "You're going to pay child support on time for 6 months. No delays, no excuses. After that, if you prove you're serious, we can talk about visitation. But for now, you don't exist for her. And if you fail, if you're late on even one payment, it's over, because I'm not going to let you play with her life." He was silent on the other end, and I hung up without waiting for a response, because the ball was in his court now, and this time, I was the one who was going to decide the pace. It was on a Sunday afternoon, almost 4 months after that conversation with him, that my daughter asked me the question I most feared. We were in the park. She was playing on the swings. When she saw a father pushing his daughter beside him, she stopped, looked at me with those big eyes and said, "Mom, why don't I have a dad who takes me on the swings?" My heart stopped. I knew this day would come. I had even rehearsed the answer in my head 1,000 times. But when the question actually came from that little mouth with that innocent voice, all the words vanished. I crouched down in front of her, held her little hands, and took a deep breath. "Honey, you have a father, but he doesn't live with us. He had to learn to be a father, and sometimes people take a long time to learn." She frowned, trying to understand. "But will he come to see me someday?" My throat tightened. "Maybe, if he learns properly." She was quiet for a while, swinging her little legs, and then said, "But I already have you, right, Mom? You're both my dad and my mom?" I broke down. Right there, in the middle of the park, in front of everyone. I started to cry. I pulled her into a tight hug and said, "Yes, my love, I'm everything you need, and I always will be." She hugged me back tightly and went back to playing as if nothing had happened. But for me, something had broken and been fixed at the same time. Because at that moment, I understood she wasn't suffering from his absence. She was okay. She was happy. She had love, care, security, everything a child needs, and all of that came from me, not from him. He might even show up one day, but he would never take the place I occupied, because I was there from day one. I was her comfort, her protection, her certainty. That night, after putting her to bed, I sat on the bedroom floor and wrote a letter. Not to her, not to him, to myself. A letter to the woman I was 3 years ago, pregnant, scared, thinking I wouldn't be able to cope. "You did it," I wrote. "You handled everything. And she's okay, she's happy. And that's all that matters." I kept that letter in a drawer, to read whenever I doubted myself. Today, when someone asked me what happened after I called the police, I answer, I happened. Because what shocked everyone wasn't whether he was arrested or not. It wasn't whether he started paying or not. What shocked them was that I became a different person. The woman everyone thought would break down, got back up. And not only did she get back up, she rebuilt everything from scratch. He paid child support on time for 6 months. Then he asked to meet his daughter. I allowed it, but with supervision, slowly, without rushing. He shows up occasionally now. He's not the father I dreamed of for her, but he's better than nothing. And you know what's most important? She doesn't need him anymore to be happy. She already is, with him or without him. But this story was never about him. It was about me. About the woman who discovered she had a strength she didn't even know existed. The woman who looked to the justice system and said, "Help me because I can't take it anymore alone." The woman who set boundaries, who demanded respect, who refused to accept crumbs. And I am proud of this woman. Some people ask me if I regret calling the police, if I think I overreacted, and I always answer the same thing. I would regret it if I hadn't done it. Because my daughter deserved justice. She deserved for someone, even if it was the law, to force her father to take responsibility, and I deserve to stop carrying everything alone. Today, when I look at my daughter, I no longer see the pain of abandonment. I see proof that a mother's love is greater than any absence. I see that we can indeed raise a child alone and raise them well. Raise them with love, with dignity, with strength. And that in the end, what matters is not who left, it's who stayed. If you're listening to me now and you're going through something similar, if your child's father also refuses to pay child support, if you've also heard that he prefers jail, I want you to know you don't have to accept this. You have rights. Your child has rights, and justice exists. It's not easy. It's not quick, but it exists, and it's worth fighting for. What shocked everyone was seeing that I didn't need him to succeed, that I was enough, that I always had been, and that my daughter, raised solely by me, is the happiest, most loved, most cared for child I know. Because when you're a single mother, you're not half, you're double, and that nobody can take away from you. If this story touched you, if you saw yourself in any part of it, leave a like now. Comment below if you've also had the courage to face justice, to fight for your child's rights. Subscribe to the channel because there are many more real stories to tell, and I don't want any mother to feel alone in this fight. And share this video, because there are many women who need to hear that they are strong enough. that they can indeed win, and that calling the police is not revenge, it's justice. Thank you for getting this far with me. See you in the next video.